Can we talk about imposter syndrome? I think it's an interesting
Yeah, man.
subject. I think every entrepreneur at some point has some level of it. Like you said,
Yep.
it can really hold you back. And the
Yep.
only person you're hurting really is yourself when you're feeling that way.
Yeah.
How have you struggled with it? How have you overcome it? Have you overcome
Yeah.
it? Tell me your story there.
Oh man, okay, well, we could go way back on this one. Like this is something that has gripped me for probably the majority of my life, and a lot of it comes from my upbringing. I grew up in a how do I say this? A not very nice environment, like an abusive kind of environment, which I won't go too much into. But it's essentially that kind of set the precedent where I remember being 11 years old at what we call intermediate. So it's kind of a transition school between primary and what we call college, US and that call high school. So it's this transitional 2 years. And I had this teacher who was honestly one of the most inspirational people I'd ever met. Like he was just so funny. I was a cheeky kid, by the way. I was way too bright in a very low decile school, so in a low socioeconomic school, where a lot of people didn't push themselves because they didn't feel like they had much hope and they didn't feel like they had much opportunity in front of them. So I was incredibly cheeky. I remember the amount of times where he would say things like, "Oh, let's talk about being confident in front of other people." And like, "Oh, why would we ever need that? When are we going to get the chance to talk in front of a crowd?" And you go, "How about right now, Vince?" And pulls me up in front of the class and goes, "Right, you're going to speak for 5 minutes. Class, give them a topic." And of course, being a bunch of 11-year-olds, the best they could come up with was egg. And so I had to speak about an egg for 5 minutes. But the incredible thing is, even though he would challenge me and he would do these embarrassing things, he also showed me something I'd never found before. And that was he truly did believe in me. The amount of times he said to me, "Man, you've got a gift, you've got something natural here, you could go really far." And that one sentence, "you could go really far," really stuck with me. It was like a hook that got into me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have to settle for this life that I'm living right now. I don't have to settle for being poor. I don't have to settle for worrying about where the bills are going to be paid from or worrying about how we're going to have food on the table. Because there was many days where, as kids, we had no food on the table. Parents encouraging us to go down to the local supermarket at night and sneak around the back and steal some food. Those kind of things, which are, by the way, not great examples of parenting, I realized later in life. So all of these things that we had to deal with, they kind of put a ceiling on you. And so therefore, anytime you rise above that ceiling, you feel very uncomfortable and you feel like you don't belong. And I remember a very pivotal moment for me, which was I was I don't even know what to call myself, man. I wasn't even really an entrepreneur. I had entrepreneurial kind of bent at the time. My first company was when I was 11, but that was pirating video games because I didn't know that was illegal. I was an 11-year-old with no moral compass. I'm just putting it out there, okay? Please don't judge me on that. But I figured out, by the way, that Commodore 64, all of the games and software we had were all based on cassette tapes. So hello, high-speed dubbing? Oh, yes, please. So I made some really good money off that.
Nice.
But I wouldn't call myself an entrepreneur at the age I was. And I won a ticket to go to this business breakfast. So I wanted to be this young businessman. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. It was the head of Adobe for Oceania, and he was coming over and he was going to be speaking. I was a big Adobe fanboy. I think Photoshop 2 had just come out, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be brilliant. So I realized if I'm going to a business breakfast, I better look the part. I didn't own a suit. I barely owned any clothes. I went down to a secondhand shop and picked up I think it was a $10 suit. It was the most ill-fitting, horrible colored gray, double-breasted piece of junk that you've ever seen. It was disgusting. But that's what I wore. And I turned up to this event. I sat at this table and I'm like, right, I'm here. I'm going to be a sponge. I'm going to take down everything this guy says. And I looked around the table and man, did I feel like an outsider. Everybody there was way older than me, for starters. Usually they look like I do now. They're old white males, and I'm going, oh, good grief. But they were really wearing really nice suits. It's this weird thing. They looked like they had their life together. They looked like they belong. And I sat there thinking, man, I am such a sore thumb here. I stick out majorly. I don't belong here. But I was determined I was going to take as much notes as I could, and I was going to learn from this experience. So I did, and his presentation, by the way, was unbelievably cool. I looked at this guy and just thought, not only was he an amazing orator, like he was this incredibly empowering speaker, but also he seemed to have his entire life together. I was like, man, I want to be this guy. Like, forget living his life. I want to be him. But then at the end of his presentation, he went round each of the tables and he came over to ours and he did the same thing at each table. He said, hey guys, have you got any questions? And in my mind, I still can remember the conversation in my mind. I have these very vivid internal conversations, by the way. And my brain's just going, okay, dude, this is your one shot. You're going to have to ask him something really intelligent to prove that you belong here. So come on, man, think of it. What's something really intelligent? While my brain's still processing this, I let out and asked him, at what point did you know you had made it? And my brain just literally went, dude, what the hell? Like, seriously, I'm out of here. Like, that was the dumbest question I've ever heard. But as soon as he said it, like the table almost, like there was this kind of little murmur of chuckling from them all. And they all looked at me and I'm like, oh, good grief, I'm an idiot. But he turned around and he said, actually, that's a really good question. So internally I'm going, wait, what? It is? I'm stoked. I'm going, brain, you know nothing. And he said, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. And I went, oh my goodness. So to hear this, by the way, as a young businessman, young entrepreneur, to hear this from this legend, he's going to give me a secret. This is something that I'm going to get access to. Oh my goodness, I'm going to be successful. So he let me in on his daily routine. He said, every day I go through this same routine. I deliberately get up early. And I'm like, oh, deliberately get up early. So I'm writing down everything he says, by the way, almost verbatim. He said, I go into the bathroom. I said, bathroom, that must be really important. He goes, I fill up the sink with cold water. Oh, cold water. Good point. Writing down cold water. He splashes it on his face. I'm like, oh, must splash, don't soak, splash. He goes, and I look in the mirror and I say, today's the day they find out you're a fraud. And it hit me like a brick. I was like, what? And he goes, man, I've never felt like I've made it. I've never felt like I fit in. I always feel like I'm a fraud. And he said, most of us do. And he gestured around the table. And that made me immediately look at that entire table completely differently. Here I was thinking I was this giant outsider because I felt like I didn't belong. But suddenly I realized I'm at a table full of people that, despite the fact they looked like they had their lives sorted, they felt like they didn't belong either, which gave me as much right to be at that table as the rest of them. He then said to me how he deals with that. He said, look, I have to remind myself that actually I am successful. I have done this. I've done so much in my life and I am capable of doing this. And it genuinely stuck with me. Now, I still suffer from imposter syndrome. In fact, I thought I'd sorted this out, man. I got to speak at a conference in San Fran back in 2018. It was one of the highlights of my career because 7,000 people there. This is awesome, man. I'm like, oh, you put me in front of a stage. I'm a happy camper. So I went to this conference. It was really surreal. They were launching this program called the Fearless 50. So Adobe now run this. It's basically choosing the top 50 digital marketers in the world.
So now you're a speaker for Adobe.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. That's a good transition.
Full circle. Weirdly, I hadn't actually made that connection. I love that. Yeah.
That'd be a good transition in a movie. All right, keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, the hero's journey. Now, but they selected these top 50 digital marketers. So I'm like, okay, cool. And then they announced that I had made the list. And I'm going, okay, well, internally I'm struggling with this because I can name 100 people that are way better at what I do than I am, you know? And then we go to this conference and they were launching this program there. And they would say, look, you know, we've announced that we're doing the top 50 digital marketers in the world. But actually, we've only selected the top 25. Now, that's even harder to hear when you're like, okay, I can name 100 people better than me, but wait a minute, you're telling me that somehow I'm in the top 25. This makes no sense to my brain. But then I'm sitting there in this audience and the guy gets up there and he goes, but I really want to highlight 3 of them. And these are 3 people that I think are really challenging the way that we do things in market, that are really trying to push the industry itself to be better. And all of a sudden I see my photo up there on the screen and it's a giant screen, man. I'm seeing this, my head's big enough already, but suddenly this is huge, like building size head. And I looked and all I could think about was, man, that guy looks like me. And then the name comes up next to it and I was like, wait, he's got the same name as me. What the hell? Like my brain just couldn't even process this stuff. And then I clicked that he was actually talking about me. And I did struggle with this. And then weirdly, Americans, I'm sorry, you would never see this in New Zealand, but I finished my session and people were asking for autographs. I'm like, autographs? I'm a marketer. What the hell's going on here? Like, I'm a barely average karaoke singer. There's no way that I'm a celebrity of any kind of count whatsoever. But it was surreal, and it was actually a really enjoyable experience. But at the conference, I was struggling with a lot of this, and at the conference they had a professor there she was talking about imposter syndrome, and I was like, oh, this is a subject that's really important to me because I know I've got imposter syndrome, but I know I can deal with it because of that whole experience around that table. I basically embrace imposter syndrome and go, if we all feel that way, then I've got as much right to be there as everyone else. So I'm like, yes, I've got this. I'm going to write a book on this anyway. So I'm going to her session and I've got my pen and paper. I'm like, this is going to be great. She's going to give me every stat and I can cheat. She's done all the research. I'm just going to reference her research in my book. Ta-da! So she sat there and she was going through it, and it was genuinely, like, honestly fascinating. Like the fact that 72% of people in the world basically associate with having imposter syndrome at points in their life, if not quite regularly. But that's the ones that admit to it. The actual research shows that it may be even higher than that. So we're going through all this different thing and who has the propensity towards it, etc. But she got to a section called How We Self-Sabotage. And that looks at how imposter syndrome affects us as entrepreneurs, affects us as marketers, and basically how we kind of, like procrastination is a good example of this, perfectionism is a good example of self-sabotage, all of these kind of things where we're trying to convince ourselves that this is the reason we're doing this. The reason I'm not finishing this is because, I want it to be perfect. But in actual fact, we're worried that if we put it out there, people will judge it, and therefore we will be exposed as this fraud. So I'm hearing all of this stuff, and it was literally like a checklist of my life, and I'm going, oh man, ouch. And then she gives another point, ouch, and another point, ouch, and I'm going, okay, this is really hard to hear. It was really quite confronting. So I wanted to go to the sessions after hers, but I was wrecked. I was ruined from her session. I literally went to a Starbucks and sat there. I felt really sorry for the girl that worked there because she came over and she goes, excuse me, sir. I was like, yeah. And she goes, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm just thinking about my life, and I'm wiping away the tears going, just leave me alone. It was really confronting, and it made me realize I need to work on myself. I need to actually address this and things. So fast forward to when I published my first book last year. That was a moment that should be an incredible, it's something I'd wanted to do for a large portion of my life, was to publish a book. I was really proud of the book. I worked really hard on this. It was my own methodologies, but it was the psychology behind that as well. Ironically, even talked about imposter syndrome in the book itself, and a number of different aspects in there on how to kind of bring experimentation into marketing, which is the theme of it. But when the book was complete and I was getting ready to publish, and someone said to me, don't do a book launch because no one goes to book launches these days. And I went, I'm a marketer, you amateur. Hold my beer, I've got this. So we ran this book launch. There was like 100 people there packed out the venue. It was actually amazing. Like, it was a wonderful night. So many supportive people. I talked through my journey of writing the book, talked through all the people that inspired and helped me. A lot of them were there as well, which was amazing. And I had to rationalize in my head the fact that people would want a signed copy of the book. Because to me, again, like I said, I'm not a celebrity, right? I wish I was a musician. I wish I was a famous singer, because I truly think I miss my calling. But and I love karaoke, but I'm not a celebrity. So why would anyone want my autograph? I was kind of rationalizing this, but then I realized if I go to a book launch, that's exactly what I would want there. Right, it's my way of showing the author that I support them, but also it's just damn cool. Like, you go to a book launch, you were there when this book was launched, and to prove it, you've got the signed copy. That is cool. So I said, you know what? I'm okay with this. I bought myself a new pen. This is my signing pen. So I turn up there and I'm like, I'm going to sign all these books, and it's going to be a wonderful night. And it was. Except I didn't count on the next thing that would happen, which is everyone said something along the lines of, I can't wait to read this. Well, thanks, Vince. I'm looking forward to reading it. And my stomach started getting knotted, and then more knotted, and then more knotted. And that night, when I went home, I'm a high extrovert, man. Being around that many people, I should be like energized and everything, but I shut down. And my brain I could hear these stupid conversations that I made up in my own head. And they were along the lines of, who does he think he is writing a book? Who does he think he is that he's got something to say over all these amazing other marketers out there? Or I started reading the book, what an amateur. This is real amateur hour stuff, So all these conversations, and I decided at that point I didn't want to talk about the book anymore. I wanted to go quiet on. Now, I'm a chief marketing officer at Cigna at the time. We had so much stuff on. I was slammed. I was super busy. So I thought, you know what? I'm just really busy, and that's going to be my excuse. So when anyone asks, why aren't you doing any marketing out there? Oh, I'm just really busy. I'm working, using word of mouth. And it was one of my mentors called me out on it and said, I haven't seen you talking on social. I haven't seen anything out there. He found out that I had turned down 2 really big media interviews, which I do regret, to be honest, because I was just too afraid. And he said to me, look, I haven't seen anything out there. And I said, yeah, I know, I'm looking at word of mouth. I've just been really, really busy. And he goes, yeah, sure. Let me talk you through what happens every time I publish a book. And this is a guy who's written like 7 books. He's a award-winning author. And he went through the same journey every time he writes a book. And that, for me, was both confronting because I didn't realize this about him, but at the same time made me feel not alone.
The same journey you went through, not the same journey that he went through each time.
Yeah, exactly. He went through the same journey every time he's done a book, but it was the same journey I was going through. It felt like he was reading my mail, basically. And he said, most people go through this. And again, it kind of reinforced that a lot of us struggle with this stuff. So I decided at that point, it was that I need to do something about this. I need to talk about it. So I wrote a LinkedIn post. I didn't think anything like what I said. So here's what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to tell you what I truly believe, which is that you need to buy this book. And I know you need to buy it because I poured my heart and literally transformed industries from this stuff. So you need to go out and buy the book. It's a good book, and I'm really proud of it. And I left it at that. That was my kind of thing. It did, by the way, massive spike in book sales. So I'm thinking, hey, this is a really good marketing tactic, first of all. But the other thing that happened was the amount of people that started talking about that and started reaching out and talking about their journey with imposter syndrome. It suddenly realized we're not all these isolated individuals. We're isolated, but we're all going through the same shared experience. So to me, that is one of the kind of driving factors. That's why I'm writing the book I'm doing at the moment called Anti-Perfect. It's all about making sure, and this is one of the big tactics, by the way, that I use now, is whenever I'm feeling imposter syndrome, I'm feeling self-doubt, all these different kind of things, what that is essentially is your brain, your thoughts, your feelings are misaligned or unaligned with your evidence. And I started realizing that everyone I've coached over the last 5 or so years, or everyone I've mentored or worked with and tried to help out, this was usually the problem I was helping them with. 9 times out of 10, it's not a marketing problem that they come to me with. They don't come and say, how can I reposition my brand? I kind of wish they did sometimes, but they usually come to me and go, dude, I'm freaking out. I'm way over my head, help. And what would happen is they would tell me all these things, these negatives about themselves. And I'm going, yeah, but the evidence that you have doesn't align with what you're feeling or what you're thinking. So it's about aligning those two things. So we use things like cookie jar method. We use like affirmations and things to remind yourself, like keep testimonials of every way that I've impacted businesses and entrepreneurs. And I used to put them on my wall in here, by the way, in my home office. But I realized when I get people over here to record a podcast, it's a little bit bizarre having all this feedback on the wall. It kind of feels a bit too tossy. So I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. So I put them in a Trello board.
Nice.
But anytime I'm kind of feeling that self-doubt, anytime, and we all have this as entrepreneurs, by the way, and it's okay to feel this. When you wake up in the morning and go, you know what? I don't even want to get out of bed today. I don't want to face the day. It's scary and I'm a fraud and everyone's going to find out. It's okay to have a bad day. And on those days, I just take a moment, I pause, I step back, and I go, okay, it's time to look after myself. So let's go and have a look at these testimonials. Let's have a look at the way that I've impacted so many people. And when you get to the end of that, 2 things happen. One, it aligns your thinking and your feeling with the evidence. But the other thing that happens is it reminds you why you do what you do. And if you're a decent entrepreneur, and I believe that most entrepreneurs are, where they genuinely want to help people, they genuinely want to make an impact, to make a mark on the world. If that's what their passion and their goal is, then this is a good exercise to remind you that it's not about you. And yes, you're allowed to have a bad day. You're allowed to have these thoughts. That is a part of being a human being. You have highs, you have lows. That is all acceptable. But at the same time, don't let that sabotage you, because you do not want to hold back what you have to offer the world to other people. You don't want to deny them what you bring to the table and you will help them with. So that's, and the needs that you meet in other people in that. So that's kind of how I deal with imposter syndrome. That's a lot of my kind of journey around that as well.